What's going on, everybody? Thank you for joining us again for just another tech and gaming show. My name is Nick, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Victor.
Hey, everyone.
So today, we thought it would be fun to bring you kind of a retro throwback-ish episode. We're going to be talking about the past of the three major game manufacturers, the three big ones. We got Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo. We found a couple of interesting articles online that we wanted to share with you. We're going to read excerpts from them for you. Also want to cite our sources because they're pretty great articles. We would suggest that you check them out yourselves as well. And we're just going to roll right into it. Victor, do you want to kick us off with Microsoft?
Yeah, sure. I found this really great article on digital trends. Subject is, has it really been 17 years? The past, present, and future of Xbox, written by Rick Marshall. So we're going to go ahead and jump in on this article because I think it has really great points on the history of Xbox. So the notation of Xbox should develop its own gaming console began gaining traction in 1998 with Kevin Backus, Seamus Backley, Otto Berklis, and Ted Hayes. I probably butchered those names, but then again, you can look the article up. So forming the software giant's first console team after successfully pitching their idea to Bill Gates. It was originally dubbed the Direct Xbox. The console was intended to be the first game system built like a PC, so it'd bring the flexibility and power of a gaming rig to the console market, which has not been seen before. The system apparently would have ran on Windows 2000, making it easy for traditional PC software developers to work within the architecture, keeping it simple and something they're familiar with. Okay, here we go. And feature more than twice processing power of the industry-leading PlayStation 2. Despite the marketing team's belief that the abbreviated Xbox name wouldn't fly, the label went over well with the focus group, so they approved the name Xbox because it contained a catchy name. Just 2 years later, Microsoft was ready to go public with its console finally, and that exactly was what Bill Gates did with the Game Developers Conference in 2000. They teased the system's vastly improved specs with potential for online play and internal storage for downloading content, games, and media. So many still remain skeptical of what they saw, seeing nothing more than a fancy PC dressed up as a gaming console, which kind of what you would expect from the first-gen console being made by a computer company. Microsoft continued to push the envelope for both console and its marketing budget with more demonstrations at E3 a few months later. It was there that an Xbox first developer connected with Bungie Studios. Obviously, we know they're well known for their Halo series. Microsoft purchased them for $30 million, and a short time later made headlines in the game industry. Bungie's decision to adapt Halo was the best use of the console's abilities and turn it into a first-person shooter. This move honestly helped make history for Xbox. Nearly a full year later, Bill Gates had help from The Rock, revealed the final design of the Xbox at the 2001 Consumer Electronics Show in Vegas, along with the system's release date. That was pretty cool. So, basically, on November 14th at Times Square, the Times Square branch of Toys R Us, they hosted the launch of Xbox. Bill Gates actually dropped by and kicked off this experiment with handing off consoles to consumers that are first to buy it. Concerns regarding the system's look and design, as well as the $299 price tag, kind of went a little weird with consumers. Didn't cause too many to fly off the shelves the first 3 weeks. One key part of the console's success was the popularity of its game, Halo, which was a flagship game, which offered the 1-2 punch of being both exclusive and a first-person shooter. The best first-person shooter hit shelves in years. Sales of Halo shattered all the records. More than 1 million copies of the game was sold in the first few months of its release. Might not seem like much today, but back then, selling millions of units was unheard of. Xbox released in Japan on February 22nd, 2002, and Europe March 14th, 2002. Though the system really failed to catch fire in either of those two regions than it actually did in America. In Japan, only 123,000 Xbox units were sold in the first week of release, validating Microsoft's fear that the system would have a tough time breaking into the difficult overseas marketplace. While Xbox sold well in North America, The launch provided troubling for Microsoft, whose expectations of the systems were lofty by any console standards, let alone a brand new system. The high cost of manufacturing Xbox didn't do the creators any favors either, making it the next big event in the system's timeline even more surprising. On April 18th, 2002, Microsoft slashed the price of its Xbox from $299 to $199. Huge dramatic price reduction made it nearly impossible for the company to earn profit from sales, but the move did succeed in encouraging more people to buy Xboxes and bringing it into their homes. It also enabled Xbox to outsell the just released Nintendo GameCube in the years that followed, further establishing the Xbox as a source to be reckoned with in the console wars.
See, I think that is super interesting there just to talk about because Microsoft has always had a hard time in Japan from the very beginning. And I kind of knew that. But honestly, based on those numbers, it kind of sounds like they didn't have, like in perspective of how many Xboxes they sold, they didn't have as hard of a time initially launching that like first Xbox with 123,000 units because they sell like Xbox Ones sell really poorly in Japan. I just think Japan has just there's no real market for Xbox in Japan at all.
Yeah. They're trying to compete with the dominant, company
Sony
in Japan,
and Microsoft, obviously.
And you're trying to cut in there, and they had high hopes for it, but it just, they were hoping they'd turn the tables with this one, but it just doesn't seem like it worked this time. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, so continuing the article, now we're going to speak over the Xbox Live implementation of Microsoft's timeline. Arguably, it's the most important event in the Xbox timeline that occurred on the console's first birthday with the launch of Live. So, let's see here. Microsoft's long-rumored online game network has already begun its beta testing phase in August 2002. It went public in November with the Xbox Live Starter Kit. If you were an early adopter, you were treated to a multiplayer gaming experience that was entirely new to the console industry. Along with being able to connect with friends and strangers, Xbox Live made it possible to download new content and take on multiplayer interaction to a whole new level. With over 150,000 subscribers in the first week alone, Xbox Live's success and the numbers continued to grow exponentially for Microsoft in the years to follow. But while the Xbox fan base continued to grow with Xbox Live, by February 2003, Microsoft already planned the next gen of Xbox, codenamed Xenon at the time. EA took issue with Xbox Live's subscription-based service, so I guess they opted out of releasing their Madden football games for the Xbox in 2003, only to cut a deal later with Microsoft. On top of everything else, the company continued to lose money on each console sold, and by 2004, the technology had once been the system's biggest selling point has become one of its most frustrating limitations. Still, they pushed forward and aimed for new features in regards to all-purpose media hub, and it was supposed to be all along with Xbox Live Arcade launching in 2004. Despite reports of the next big thing arriving by day, the launch of Halo 2 proved rumors of the Xbox's demise have been greatly exaggerated. It sold more than 2.5 million units in the first 24 hours the game was available. It made $125 million in sales, the most successful launch of any entertainment product, whether it's game, movie, or music album in consumer history at that point. The success of Halo 2 stood in stark contrast of the floundering sales of the Xbox itself. Continued to Microsoft significantly more to produce than it ever could rake in with sales.
Halo 2, I remember being huge. It was such a huge launch. And I didn't know that it was actually, of its time, the most successful launch of any entertainment product ever. I believe Grand Theft Auto 5 completely broke every single record that's ever existed now.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting to know that Halo 2 had done that, especially because I always remember the Xbox as being kind of an unsuccessful console. Not a failure of a console, but I would say most companies would consider it an unsuccessful launch when you're competing against a product like the PlayStation 2, which sold, I think it sold over 100 million units. I believe it was really, really stupid high, which we'll get to later. But when you're competing with that, it seems like it's a really big deal, but it turns out that you have the most successful product to ever exist in Halo 2. I
Yeah.
remember that being on the news as a kid.
Yeah, it was. I remember being in line midnight, getting my steel cover Halo 2 Special Edition console disc. It was the greatest feeling I've ever had in my life, and it didn't underwhelm me at all. It was exceeded every one of my expectations. It was a great game, and it still is.
Now, with that, it looks like we're coming to the end of the original Xbox. What did you like? What were your thoughts on the original Xbox, Victor? How did you feel about it? I know that you owned one.
Yeah, I didn't get it at launch because at that point I was in with PlayStation and PlayStation 2. I didn't really hear anything about Xbox. Honestly, when I got my Xbox, first thing I did picked up Halo 1 because I was like, I heard
That was
about
the
this
game.
game. That was
Yeah.
the game that my first Xbox game. So picked it up. Honestly, I was impressed with it. The controller kind of threw me off a bit when it launched. It had a huge controller.
The giant ass frisbee. Yeah.
Yeah, it was huge. But I kind of got used to it. I liked that it. I don't know. I just liked the content. That the content really drew me in.
Right.
It was a little different than PlayStation for me. You know.
It was kind of a more, I would say, like teen and adult gamer
Yeah.
type console. Whereas I wouldn't say that the PlayStation 2 didn't have that, but I think that the PlayStation 2 wasn't quite that marketed. It was more of a universal console for anybody. And then the
Exactly, yeah.
GameCube, I would say, was more marketed towards kids because it's always what Nintendo's been about. So like Xbox kind of had a little niche. And I know I don't know if it mentions the numbers, but they sold over 20 million units. So it wasn't a failure, it just wasn't necessarily successful. And especially in comparison to the Xbox 360, which sold over 80 million units by the
Yeah.
end of its lifetime. So, but I think if you look back on it, it was a pretty good foothold getting into the industry and then being able to continue to exist and be profitable.
Yeah, I think as their first console, I think it was impressive for what it was because Microsoft kind of is more focused on building PCs, and I think a lot of people came into it with, hey, this PC manufacturer is going to build a game console. It's going to be way better than all these other people who aren't specializing in building computers. That literally they're mini PCs basically.
Yeah.
They're just tailored towards a
Specifically to gaming. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. So, I mean, I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. It was a pinnacle of my gaming career. First introduced to Xbox Live on it. Halo 2 came out. I signed up for Xbox Live. Once I had Xbox Live and Halo 2 together, that was it.
Unstoppable.
I did not touch my PlayStation ever since then. I don't even know what happened to it. But but yeah, that kind of sold me on it. So after that, I was Xbox fanboy, and I have nothing but great things to say. I wish I got it at launch.
Yeah, I never had an Xbox, the original Xbox. I played it at friends' houses. I always thought it was a fun console to play, especially when playing Halo 2, which was just a killer title. Like that was an amazing title to have on your system. But yeah, I never owned one. My first Xbox was a 360, which coincidentally is the next part of the article.
Yeah. So we're gonna go over 360, letting you guys know the history that's been going on with this. On May 12th, 2015, or on May 12th, 2005, Microsoft unveiled the Xbox 360, the next generation gaming console. With plans to release the 360 in November, the company hoped to clear its early debut, almost a full year before the PlayStation 3 and Nintendo Wii are scheduled to arrive. You would put the 360 in a good position to dominate the market, which also meant the writing was on the wall for the original Xbox. Later that year, production on the Xbox officially ceased, with the final tally of sold consoles sitting around 24 million units. While this was nothing to scoff about, the number fell short of their initial prediction of 50 million console sales in each household, it was nowhere near the sales total of the PS2, which went on to sell over 153 million units, but it did outsell the GameCube and the Dreamcast. The last game produced for Xbox in North America was Madden 09, released in August 2008, and support for the system was discontinued in March 2009. The final nail in the coffin was hammered on April 14th, 2010, with Xbox Live completely eliminated from the original Xbox console. The release of 360 in the US on November 22nd, 2005, and in Europe and Japan in the following months. Sellouts happened in every market except Japan, where the system still struggled to find an audience. By the end of 2005, more than 1.5 million consoles had shipped, putting the system well on its way to becoming a new master of the console wars. But in the rush to get 360s into households, it came to serious problems, which the system got a pass. So, we all know about the term red ring of death if you've had an Xbox 360, at least for the first couple gens. It began sending shivers down the spines of Xbox gamers. Among hardware issues and software issues that plagued early models of the 360, one nasty problem caused the entire system to counter a fatal error and give owners a red ring of light around the console's power button. Those flaws forced Microsoft to repair and replace countless systems, even extending the console's warranty due to that. Even though there was problems for early adopters of the system, the 360 sold amazingly well, and by January 2010, it sold more than 39 million units. In both 2009 and 2010, both proved important to the 360. First, the motion and voice control peripheral would eventually become Kinect after it was announced in June 2009 at the E3 convention. It was originally called Project Natal. The device was expected to revolutionize the way 360 owners interacted with their console and media. Kinect basically was a tracking device that allowed your body to be the controller.
And I remember there were such high hopes for it, and of all the things that they showed, it looked like it was going to be incredibly impressive. And like they showed other things as well, where there was supposed to be like artificial intelligence interaction and whatnot. And it turned out it was just a giant, tremendous piece of steaming shit.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it wasn't that bad, but I didn't like it. I didn't think Kinect was that special. They sold it as something that was amazing, and I just don't think that the technology was there yet. And then they brought it out again in the Xbox One, and it was still not that good. So, as much as they tried, the portion of, I think that they were kind of shooting for augmented reality a little bit there, and it just didn't pan out. But
yeah, I had high hopes for it. I went to the early viewing for it in San Francisco before it even came out. It was fun. I liked it. But realistically, I play my games in the bedroom. I don't have all that space to be moving around and stuff. So
right.
I always had to take my Xbox and connect to the living room and clear out all the couches and all the tables and make space for it. It was nice, but realistically, at least in my personal experience,
but it was kind of niche.
Yeah, if you had a huge house, huge living room, I guess it would have worked for you. But then again, it was different. It required physical activity, which a lot of games at that time didn't really require. So we're going to go and talk about, after the Kinect was announced, Microsoft announced that the 360 was going to get a major redesign with a thinner body, upgraded internal specs, more USB ports, and built-in Wi-Fi, which was a huge win. I hated those adapters.
Those adapters were so crappy.
It was like $100 for
It's crazy to see that it says that came out and hit shelves June 18th, 2010. Sorry to steal part of your article.
Yeah.
Because the PlayStation 3 came with Wi-Fi built in. And so for like 4 years, the PlayStation 3 had Wi-Fi built in versus the Xbox, so you had to get that stupid adapter. And that adapter sucked anyway.
Yeah, it wasn't great.
some sad times, dark ages for the Xbox.
Yeah, but given 4 years between the release of the first Xbox and the arrival of its successor, it's no surprise that rumors started circulating in March 2011 that the 360 was on its way out and Microsoft was already working on its next console. There was no stopping the internet rumor train in regards to the unofficial code name of Xbox 720. Even with the next gen rumors, the sales of the 360 continued to grow, and by September of 2012, the company announced it hit 70 million units sold. And by December, that number jumped to 75 million. Although the sales of the 360 went behind the Nintendo Wii, which sold 100 million. Sorry, cut into that a little early. The news followed a month later that the debut of the Xbox Music and Video. Microsoft's new media services not only replaced existing services for the Xbox, but offered attractive and Apple-style integration across all devices running Windows software. So they tried to get on that, you buy this, it works with all of the products that we offer. You can listen to music.
Which was starting to get super popular, I think, around that time, 2012, 2013.
Yeah, that was literally when it started kind of getting popularity. But then in May 2013, Microsoft unveiled the next Xbox, the Xbox One. On the surface, it looked like it had a chance to compete with the PS4, which was announced earlier that year. But rumors were swifting about the Xbox One potentially requiring an online connection and limiting the sales of used games. When Microsoft brought the Xbox One to E3, it didn't get any easier. They revealed a $500 price for its system with Kinect bundled in every system. They were trying to get rid of those Kinects, I already know.
Yeah, I remember that.
But Sony not only confirmed, but there would be no online requirements, but that it would just cost just $400, which was a knockout. A short time later, Phil Spencer was made head of Xbox, a position he holds today. Despite renewed enthusiasm for the Xbox brand, Xbox One found itself in a struggle to match the sales of other similar consoles. However, second place led to a tremendous amount of innovation for Microsoft. It led to more first-party cross-platform games, enabling friends on PC and Xbox One to play with each other, Game Pass, and access older Xbox games as well. So a lot of changes kind of happened with the Xbox One X. Basically, it's not Xbox One X. Damn, we're going to have to cut this. The updated Xbox One S shrank the system considerably, adding HDR support and 4K Blu-ray support, while the Xbox One X was the most powerful console in the world at the time of the release. Native 4K gaming and being even smaller than the Xbox One S. Over to you, Nick.
Whoa. I'm going to talk about the Xbox a little bit. So, while I did have an Xbox 360, I had an Xbox 360, an Xbox 360 Slim. I had the Xbox 360 Slim E. I don't know where the hell that was. So I had several Xbox units myself. I liked the console. I thought it was pretty good. The Xbox 360, I would say, might be the one that people like the most or like have the most nostalgia for.
Yeah.
Just because not a ton of people own the Xbox. Not a ton of people. The Xbox One is still too new to have any consideration for it in being that I love this console. It's my favorite. Although I would say I like that console as my favorite. The Xbox is. I have an Xbox One X. I think it's phenomenal. I'm really looking forward to what Microsoft has in the future, but I've enjoyed what I've seen so far. Really, I kind of jumped in on the Xbox 360 where I had a hell of a time playing Halo 3. I picked up Halo 2 so that I could play it for the first time. God, I miss backwards compatibility for PlayStation. I'm glad that Microsoft has kept up with that. And I don't know. I'm not super nostalgic on Xbox, but it's cool to hear everything about it. I think it's crazy that the original Xbox launched at $299 and then went down to $199. Considering that in the current console generation we're at, even just getting a console for $299 today can sometimes be a challenge.
Yeah, that was definitely a desperation move right there.
That was desperation. But I mean, here we are at the end of the article. What are your thoughts on Xbox? Are you?
Yeah, I mean, I really love the brand. I think they've innovated a lot in the past years. 360 was a big one for me. That was where a majority of my experience kind of came into play. Got it day one, was on it ever since. This was my only game console at this point, other than the original Xbox. So I really didn't have the option to just switch out to other consoles in the system and other consoles that were competing with Xbox, but nor did I want to switch to them. I was very happy with my 360. Xbox Live went through so many changes. The system software updates went through so many changes. Avatars came into play. There were the whole media hub feature of it was really cool. A lot of nostalgic moments for 360. It holds a special place in my heart and will always hold a special place in my heart. One of my biggest reasons for keeping the Xbox 360, even besides that, is because of Guitar Hero. I'm a huge, big fan of Guitar Hero, and don't really like the new Guitar Heroes too much. I like the 5 buttons, give
The
me the
OG
colors.
Guitar Heroes.
Yeah, give me the OG Guitar Hero. So I'm keeping it. It's set up in my room when I want to play the Guitar Hero. But honestly, I'm just really excited. I'm really excited to see. I feel like every time they do an advancement with Xbox, it's not always just a time and a half better. It's always like, this is huge leaps forward. It's like, you want 8K gaming, take 8K gaming.
No way. I still don't stand by that. I don't think there's any way we're going to get like true 8K gaming out of the next consoles, but you never know. Moving right along here, we're going to hit on Sony's past with the PlayStation. We have an article from GameSpot, The Evolution of PlayStation Consoles by Jimmy Thang. This is from November 3rd, 2016. It's a little old, but bear in mind, so is Sony's history. So should still cover it just fine. So we have a look back at the Sony PlayStation consoles. Sony launched its PlayStation brand back in 1994. Since then, the company revealed 4 major consoles, all of which have received refreshed designs. PlayStation Division now represents 78% of Sony's profits. Bear in mind, this was in 2016. And with the company releasing its Pro system in November, once again, this is 2016, we thought we'd take a stroll down memory lane and look back at the PlayStation consoles. True nostalgia for me. So the original PlayStation launched in Japan December 3rd, 1994. It went on to become one of the first video game consoles to ship. I'm sorry, not one of the first video game consoles to ship more than 100 million units. It's considered to be a part of the 5th generation of game consoles to compete against the Sega Saturn, the Nintendo 64 in the mid-90s. The catalyst for the console actually spawned from a failed partnership with Nintendo when Sony was in talks with building an add-on for the Super Nintendo. PlayStation would go on to feature a dual-speed CD-ROM drive with a 1-core CPU that had 2 megabytes of RAM along with 1 megabyte of video RAM, with graphics that could deliver up to 360,000 polygons per second, 2 megabytes of RAM, and 1 megabyte of video RAM.
Mind blown.
Mind officially blown. The original PlayStation played a pivotal role in transitioning the industry away from the 2D graphics to the real-time 3D rendering. Its use of the compact disc format also allowed it to push high-fidelity full-motion video, something that competing Nintendo 64 struggled to do with a space-limited cartridge system. Speaking of storage, the PlayStation didn't feature an internal hard drive. Instead, game saves required the use of memory cards, which were 128 kilobytes. Again, mind blown.
Yeah, I used to hold on to my 2 megabyte memory card, dear life.
It's also worth mentioning the PlayStation originally didn't ship with a DualShock controller. I remember that. That's crazy. Instead, its basic PlayStation controller lacked thumbsticks and forced feedback technology. Sony would later release the first DualShock controller in 1997, which would add those features. That was kind of crazy. I remember them not having the sticks on the controller, and then when they added the sticks, like it's crazy to think. And I didn't really remember that or even think about it until they released the PlayStation Classic, and then stupidly didn't have the DualShock controllers with it. They went more with that classic design.
I forgot about that.
It's insane that you would think, I'm going to play a 3D game with no thumbsticks. That's
the
just...
D-pad was where it's at.
Yeah, I just got the D-pad. Anyways, I do want to read the notable game series that were featured on that console: Resident Evil, Tekken, Dead or Alive, Tomb Raider, Final Fantasy 7, 8, 9, Castlevania Symphony of the Night, which I hear so much about from all types of people constantly, Silent Hill, Metal Gear Solid, Crash Bandicoot, one of my favorite games, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, Gran Turismo, Chrono Cross, Spyro the Dragon, OG, Papa the Rapper. The PS1 was the reiteration of the PlayStation 1. Starting its tradition of releasing smaller versions of consoles, Sony released the PS1 on July 7th, 2000. In addition to being smaller, it featured a redesigned chassis, which was much rounder. It also received an updated graphical user interface. From there, and I'm going to just say real quick, I love the PS1. That was my first game console of note. I believe that I also had a Nintendo 64 for a short time. My dad was really into video games when I was little, so that was his stuff, but the PlayStation 1 was mine, and I loved it. Crash Bandicoot, Spyro. I remember those games vividly. I also played some Gran Turismo when I got a little bit older, which I enjoyed, but I will always remember my times with Spyro and Crash Bandicoot. Those were pivotal in me continuing to be a gamer today, and I love that they've been remastered.
Yeah, I don't remember if Driver was an original PlayStation game, but I vividly remember playing Driver. I don't know, it might be PS2, but I want to say it's PlayStation.
I don't know. I'd never played Driver, so those of you that have and hate me for it, that's fine. Yeah, that to me is nostalgia, the PlayStation 1. Moving right along here, we have the PlayStation 2, first released in Japan March 2000. That's ridiculous to me. I'm sorry, before I can even continue. They released an updated version of the PlayStation called the PS1 in 2000 to then later release the PlayStation 2 in 2000. Well, actually, the PS1 came out July of 2000, and then the PS2 came out in March of 2000. So they made the updated PS1 after making the PS2. That just doesn't make sense to me. I hope that's accurate information. I'm not even positive on that. But anyways, it very well may be. That guy probably did more research than I did. Okay, first released Japan March 4th, 2000. The PlayStation 2 has gone on to become one of the best-selling consoles to date, selling more than 155 million units over a 12-year span. PlayStation 2 is part of the sixth generation of consoles, competed with the Sega Dreamcast, Nintendo GameCube, and the Microsoft Xbox, which we now know all too well. Ultimately, the PS2's leg up on the competition was its sheer library and size. The Sony console produced well over 2,000 games. Let's see. The PlayStation 2 launched with its Emotion Engine CPU, which was a one-core processor clocked at 294.9 megahertz. It featured 32 megabytes of system RAM and 4 megabytes of video RAM. Really ramping it up there.
Oh, yeah.
It was backwards compatible with most PS1 games. I didn't even know it was most. I thought it was all, which was a rare feature in the time. It was also the first console to support DVDs, which is pivotal, which in addition to being able to enable games with larger assets, allowed the PS2 to play DVD movies. Of course, that's kind of redundant. It was also the first console to support USB ports, which the PlayStation iToy camera would be able to take advantage of upon its release in 2003.
That DVD player was, sorry to cut in, that DVD player was pivotal.
I was going to say, yeah, absolutely detrimental probably in its success because it came out in 2000. The GameCube never had the DVD slot, which we'll get to eventually, but it didn't have the DVD slot, so they had a leg up there, making it kind of like a multimedia device. And that was when DVD was new. So, like, you could easily get a PlayStation and be like, this is my DVD player, and it plays games.
Yeah, that's probably why my parents got it. They're like, hey, we'll get that for you.
Yeah, 155 million sold.
Movies.
Yeah, exactly. That was the selling point for the parents. Do you mean to tell me this can play DVDs? While the original console allowed users to install an optional 40 gigabyte hard drive, it still used memory cards. Unlike the PS1, however, which used 128 kilobyte cards, storage was bumped up to 8 megabytes. The PlayStation 2 also introduced the DualShock 2, one of the best controllers of all time. While still wired, this controller featured a new black finish and tighter sticks. Competed against Dreamcast, GameCube, Microsoft Xbox. Notable games from that was Grand Theft Auto 3, Vice City, San Andreas, Final Fantasy X, Devil May Cry, Metal Gear Solid 2 and 3. Also had Twisted Metal Black. I don't really think that's a very notable game, but they can say that if they want. The Jak and Daxter series, very notable. Ratchet and Clank, very notable. Sly Cooper, Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2. Katamari Damacy, God of War 1 and 2, yes. Gran Turismo 3. And I believe it also had Gran Turismo 4 on there. Those were some really notable games. They really, really were. A lot of those games, I don't remember all of them. But Metal Gear Solid, some of the best games on that platform. Jak and Daxter, Ratchet and Clank, Sly Cooper, Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2. It was really the time of the mascot, kind of. So, like, Ratchet and Clank, I think, was very successful because cute little characters. Fun for, I would imagine, teenagers, but also kids. I played almost all the games I just listed from that, and I had a lot of fun. The PlayStation 2, I would say, to me, was a really good and nostalgic console. Can I go back and play those games today? Probably not. But I did enjoy them a lot. And some of them even got remade. So games like Ratchet and Clank, we can truly enjoy. And then we're going to go ahead and move on to the Slim PS2. Originally, they released a fat PS2. This isn't from the article. A fat PS2. Massive kind of piece of shit, if you ask me. It didn't like break down and stuff, but it was huge. And I feel like it was just awkwardly bulky. I don't know.
Someone breaks into your house, you can't
Beat
reach
'em,
for
yeah.
a bat, pick up the PlayStation.
Pick up
just
your
bat 'em with-
PlayStation 2, you got it. So they released a PS2 Slim, which I like a lot more, but it's very cheap feeling. PS2 Slimline, September 2004, Sony continued its strategy of releasing smaller versions of its own consoles when it unveiled the PS2 Slimline. Not only was the system smaller, but it also was quieter, a lot quieter, and included a built-in Ethernet port, which meant nothing to me. As you can tell, they don't even bring up the fact that you could play online on the PlayStation 2 because it was that.
I think on the bulky PS2, you had to buy an adapter.
Yeah,
I
you did.
bought that adapter,
Yep.
and I tried plugging something in there, and I
SOCOM.
never got it to work.
Yeah,
I could not find anyone on there.
SOCOM was one of the few games that I remember being online for the PlayStation 2. I remember seeing that little online symbol. It said online in gray, and then it had like
What
little
is that?
dots and or little circles. It was hilarious. That was Sony's first foray into the online gaming sphere, and it was not a good one. Moving right along to a better foray into the online gaming sphere, except for their big mishap with the PlayStation Network during this time. We got the PS3, which was first released November 11th, 2006 in Japan, followed a week later by its North American debut. PlayStation 3 sold more than 80 million units worldwide and competed against Microsoft Xbox 360 and the Nintendo Wii. It launched at a whopping $599, but I believe you can get a $499 version, which it doesn't mention here, which had a 20 gigabyte hard drive. The 60 gigabyte version was $600. It was the most expensive system of the bunch. It was the first console to have a Blu-ray drive and was priced cheaper than most standalone Blu-ray players when it launched, which is absolutely insane that they charge that much money for Blu-ray drives. At the heart of the PS3 was its proprietary cell processor, which detrimented Sony a lot of times. Sony designed the chip in partnership with Toshiba and IBM. However, the CPU became controversial among developers due to how difficult it was to program, which I just mentioned. The cell featured 7 cores and was clocked at 3.2 gigahertz. The PlayStation 3's graphics used NVIDIA RSX Reality Synthesizer GPU. I didn't even know that. As far as I've ever known, AMD has been doing stuff graphics-wise with these consoles. It's really interesting to know that NVIDIA helped with the PS3's graphics. It featured a 256 megabytes of VRAM and clocked in at 550 megahertz. PS3 was also the first PlayStation system to support HDMI and 1080p output. I remember that. Initial versions of PS3 were backwards compatible with PS2 games, but that was because Sony physically incorporated a PS2 processor inside the chassis. To cut costs, Sony later removed this feature shortly after launch. Sad times. The PlayStation 3 also introduced Wi-Fi connectivity and came with a 20 gigabyte internal hard drive, which allowed users to install their own hard drive as well. See, I kind of think that that's a little bit wrong there because I remember there being a 20 gigabyte version and a 60 gigabyte version. I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that they launched the 20 gig version for $500 and a 60 gig for $600. Additionally, the console also saw the birth of the PlayStation Network, which allowed players to download games and use video viewing apps like Netflix and YouTube. In addition, the PS3 introduced the company's PlayStation Plus subscription service, which also provided gamers with early access to betas and game discounts. The PS3 also introduced the DualShock 3 controller, which was the first wireless version of Sony's long-running controller. Top of that, the DualShock 3 also featured motion sensing technology, piggybacking off of the success of the Wii. Sony would release its own PlayStation Move controller for the PlayStation 3 in 2010. Terrible decision. Move didn't really go anywhere. The Nintendo Wii was the only one that really had a foothold in all of that like motion controller stuff. Also to mention, it doesn't mention when PlayStation Plus came out. PlayStation Plus wasn't required, so that was something that I think is worth noting. You didn't have to pay for Live. And then in addition to not having to pay for Live, or for their version of Live, PlayStation Plus came out kind of late. I think, in the PlayStation 3's life cycle. And I don't even think Sony knew what they were doing with it other than making a premium subscription and kind of just going, you get discounts, and sometimes free games.
Yeah, you got to combat Xbox
come
Live
a long
here,
way.
You know?
You come a long way, baby.
Yeah.
You'll get there. So anyways, notable games on the PlayStation 3. Some of these are, I would say, even stand up today. The Last of Us. That's why I bring it up. Grand Theft Auto 4 and 5. Uncharted 2 and 3. And Uncharted 1. Little Big Planet. Little Big Planet 2 was more important than Little Big Planet. Little Big Planet 2. Red Dead Redemption, Metal Gear Solid 4, Guns of the Patriots, and God of War 3. Now, I feel like there's more notable games for that, and yet I'm just going to say it blankly. Yeah, you had Killzone 2, which was highly controversial when it was announced at E3, and they showed off some like amazing gameplay trailer that turned out to just be all CG. And then it also had Gran Turismo 5 and Gran Turismo 6, both of which I think were pretty good. Gran Turismo 5, I believe, was hailed as a little bit of a better Gran Turismo. Man, there had to be other games of note that I'm just not really coming up with.
There's just so many great games just on PlayStation in general. Just
very, very true. Yeah. Very true. Victor agrees that PlayStation has much better games than anyone.
No, their library is way bigger than
they do have a really
Xbox's.
extensive library, and Sony has tons and tons of first-party studios. I say that, and then somebody will be like, it's only like 19. But they have a lot of first-party studios, but the note there is that a lot of these first-party studios create really, really great stuff. Mm-hmm. You know, I can't really single out any first-party studio that Sony has that just isn't performing well, in my opinion. Also, as I mentioned that, Infamous 1 and 2, those are great games by Sucker Punch. Moving on, Sony released the PS3 Slim in September 2009, kind of making up for the fat PS3, which was massive. Oh, and by the way, in case you didn't know, I believe was used as much energy as a refrigerator per year. Not only was it a third smaller and lighter due to the cell moving to a new 45 nanometer manufacturing process. That's crazy to hear. It was also consumed less power and ran cooler and quieter than the original model. The Slim provided the power switch on the back of the console. The console also featured a new PS3 logo, with Sony moving away from the original model's font. Also famously featured in the Spider-Man films that had Tobey Maguire. So it's the same exact font that they used for the Spider-Man text. The PS3 Slim was worlds better and is usually hailed as the best version of the PS3. I liked it. I had one of those. I just stupidly traded that for an Xbox 360. Now, I'm not saying that in the sense that I hate Xbox, but I love PlayStation. I didn't realize it. I thought that I got bored of my PlayStation. I traded it. I hated myself. And then I bought a PS3 Super Slim, which is what we're on to now. PlayStation Super Slim released in September 2012. Marketed by the first time, Sony made a second redesign revision to one of its mainline consoles. Here, Sony removed the front slot loading disc tray. In its place, the chassis was redesigned to incorporate a sliding lid that covered the optical drive, which had to be accessed from the top of the console. Not only was the console slimmer than the previous model, but at just 4.3 pounds, it was also 3 pounds lighter. It's crazy that when they do like a super slim design, the PS2 Slim was insanely small for a console.
It was small.
It's so great. I have a PS2 Slim. I will never let that thing go. And I have a super slim PS3, which a lot of people do not like. It's a little louder because it's so small that like you can hear the disc spinning the entire time you play it. I've gone back to the PS3. That thing is slow as hell. It's super slow. Like when you like navigate through menus, especially if you go to the PlayStation Store. But that is, I mean, it's not super old, but it's still pretty nostalgic console for me. That was like the first like console generation when I like had the money to buy my own stuff and whatnot. I still didn't get it at launch. I actually had an Xbox 360 first. I'm a little ashamed to say that. Yeah, I love the PlayStation 3, great generation, and brought us into the age that we're at today with probably arguably Sony's best console yet. PlayStation 4 was released in North America on November 15th, 2013, and sold more than 1 million units in its first day, making it the fastest selling console in a 24-hour period to date. This article is from 2016. I don't know if that still stands. The PS4 marked the first time Sony would release the console with a CPU based on the x86 instruction set, which was the same processor architecture that gaming PCs use. Specifically, it had an 8-core AMD x86 64 Jaguar CPU clocked at 1.6 gigahertz along with 8 gigabytes of GDDR5 RAM, which it shared with its integrated AMD Radeon GPU. PlayStation 4 also introduced the ability to upload and share gameplay clips. A share button was added to the DualShock 4 controller, which also received an ergonomic overhaul and added to the headset and mic ports. The PS4 is also paving the way for PlayStation VR to support later this year. That is already out. And we will apparently not talk about it because it looks like that's not going to be gone over in the article. But it's not really, I wouldn't consider it a PlayStation console. PS4, great console. I love it. It's going to go down for me as one of the best consoles that I've had. There's been so many great games on there, so many great remakes, so many highs. It doesn't mention it. PS4 came out at $399. We heard it from the Microsoft article that we had. I guess not the Microsoft article, the article talking about Xbox. And it came out at $399, which detrimented Microsoft. I mean, Microsoft was hammered by the fact that it was $100 cheaper. They were also able to play used games. Game sharing wasn't a thing. You could literally just hand a game to somebody else. They could put it in their console, not a big deal. It was the first time that Sony required you to have PlayStation Plus in order to play online. Still do today, obviously. It is pretty notable. I love the console. I think it's doing really well. I think that it's had some strong support. Some of the notable games, which there are far more now, Uncharted 4: Thieves' End, Bloodborne, Infamous Second Son, Until Dawn. That is kind of a pathetic list, to tell you the truth. But we got Spider-Man, God of War, Horizon Zero Dawn. Trying to think of any other games that come to mind. I literally only buy Sony games. Like, that's all I buy. And yet I'm sitting here unaware of what next.
You all know them.
Yeah, you know them all. What is it? Detroit Become Human. That's a really good one, which is also available for PlayStation Plus users right now. Yeah. Exactly. Gran Turismo Sport. I don't know how many people love that game or hate it. And that is everything that I can think of right now. So hate me if you want.
Black Ops 4?
Yeah, that's not a PS4 exclusive game. We're not going over those. Sorry if I'm forgetting your favorite game. I do apologize. Last Guardian. Oh my gosh. Actually, that's interesting on its own, which I'm not going to break too far into the story here, but that was originally slated to come out for PS3, like early in the launch cycle of the PS3. That game had like an 11-year development cycle or something. It was crazy. No one ever expected it to come out, and then it came out to PS4. So another exclusive for the PS4. Other than that, we're also slated to get The Last of Us 2 and Death Stranding, so be excited. But that pretty much wraps it up for PlayStation. I'm sorry. No, it doesn't. The PlayStation 4 Slim continues Sony's tradition of releasing smaller, lighter variants of the console, does away with the PS4's sharp edges in favor of rounded corners. Some of the upgrades under the hood include an addition of 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi, Bluetooth 4.0, and USB 3.1 support. System is also more power efficient and runs a bit cooler and quieter than the original model. One big drawback, it removes the PS4's optical port. So the slim version of the console I also had. I got the PS4. Oh my gosh, this is like the best thing. I got the PS4 on launch day. It's the first console that I got the day of launch. And I loved it. Great console. Had a great time playing it. But I did switch it out for the PS4 Slim. And I felt like it was way better. Way quieter. And then I switched that to a PS4 Pro, which is way louder. Although I would say it's probably on par with the original PlayStation. And then going into the PlayStation 4 Pro, this says that it was scheduled to launch November 10th, 2016, because again, I'm reading an article from 2016. I don't know how many times I'm going to say that. That's probably the last time you have to hear it. Unlike the traditional refreshes, the PS4 Pro offers a notable bump in specs. The console is based on AMD's Polaris graphics and features a 4.2 teraflop GPU performance, more than double the original PS4's 1.84. In addition, Sony's purports that the PS4 Pro will support 4K gaming capabilities, which we know that it does. The console will also be completely backwards compatible with the PS4. Backwards compatible with the PS4? It is a PS4. Sony says developers can use the extra processing power to bolster the graphic fidelity of existing titles at 1080p. As we know, some of the games are available on higher frame rates. Some of them have better graphic capabilities. Some of them have higher resolutions. Great console. I think it was a decent mid-generation refresh. I guess it's the PlayStation own, honestly, if you're going to have a PlayStation 4. But Microsoft did do it better. I got to fess up with the Xbox One X.
The PS4 Pro is a real masterpiece. So,
Masterpiece. I'm sorry, that was an inside joke from work. But yeah, it was a really, I think that the PS4 Pro is a really good console. I've been using it, fastest one yet, enjoyable, can't wait for PS5. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. We're talking retro. I love PlayStation. That's the most nostalgic for me. Have a great time with it. You can tell that Microsoft and Victor get along with the Xbox. So now we're going to move on to something that I would say we're both slightly nostalgic for, but less so than Sony and Microsoft. Here we're going into a visual history of Nintendo's video game consoles by this you can find on Business Insider. It's written by Jeff Dunn and Kevin Webb. Came out May 16th, 2019, a little bit more recent here. And I'm going to go ahead and pass this off to Victor to start us off.
Perfect. So first off, before I start, close your eyes and picture these visual images as I describe them to you.
Actually, you're going to have to do that for the first one because the first one's a little bit crazy. I'd highly suggest you check the article out because some of these things, like, I didn't even know they made, and it's really interesting.
Yeah, just picture an Atari. Okay. So, exploring the legacy of Nintendo's hardware offers an interesting look on how video games have grown from the earliest days of 8-bit pixels to the high-definition marvel that is Nintendo Switch. Before there was the NES, there was the Color TV game. That's the name. Nintendo first dipped its toes into console gaming, launching 5 of these rectangles between 1977 and 1980. All in its native Japan, which is why most of us probably never even heard about it.
Never seen them or heard of them.
There were no cartridges or discs. You could only play whatever was loaded onto the system by default. The first of the bunch was built in partnership with Mitsubishi and included a simple game called Light Tennis, which most of you might know as Pong.
That's crazy and really interesting to know, honestly.
Yeah, I want to get my hands on one of those things, but then again, I don't live in Japan, so probably won't ever happen.
I bet you anything, those consoles are insanely expensive, and you could probably find them on eBay for a lot of money. To describe it to you, it is a bright neon orange.
He's not exaggerating.
It looks kind of like there's 2 joysticks on the side, but it might just be knobs. And I really have, I don't know, I'm sure that it was extremely advanced in its day, but it looks like something from like a 1980s alien-esque sci-fi film.
Well, it's
really interesting.
1980s.
Yeah, it is from the 1980s. No, 77 to 1980. So kind of.
And
1980.
it is in color, which is, I'm assuming, a big advancement back in the day.
What a whirlwind.
And before there was the Game Boy, there was the Game & Watch. Again, this is a series of handhelds with each one capable of playing one simplified game on a tiny LCD display. 60 different models were made in total.
What the hell?
And Nintendo roughly sold 43 million units between 1980 and 1991.
First of all, that's extremely impressive, but 60 different models.
Yeah, I actually own one of those models. I have one that is specifically blackjack. I will bring it in for Nick to get his opinions on, but I was surprised
crazy.
It was Nintendo. It literally has Nintendo branding all over it.
That's crazy. I've never seen one, nor played one. I know Game & Watch from Smash Brothers, but that is what I know.
Throwback, and it looks like a TV.
Way throwback. I can't believe it has an LCD.
It has a widescreen as well, so be in mind. Some of them might have a widescreen.
Whoa. Whoa, the tag.
Okay. Now we get to the familiar stuff. Nintendo built on the success of its various arcade titles with the 1983 launch of the Family Computer, or Famicom, in Japan. 2 years later, it released the American version, known as the Nintendo
Entertainment System,
Yes,
NES.
Nintendo Entertainment System, NES. After massive years along recessions, it's hard to underestimate just significant the NES was for the gaming industry. Its standardized business models gave home to several iconic hits and made Nintendo a titan in its field. That
Very
was
true.
a badass console.
That-
I enjoyed that console so much.
That's going to be one that a lot of people remember. Going through the history, it looks like they're not going to talk about it because it's a visual history, but it kind of gives a little bit of information here and there. The NES, as far as I know, sold best. You had the NES sold the best, the SNES sold slightly worse than the NES, the Nintendo 64 sold slightly worse than the SNES, the GameCube sold the poorest, and then it took a huge jump up with the Wii, and then it took a huge jump down with the Wii U, and then they're escalating once again with the Nintendo Switch. But that was one of their highest selling game consoles, I believe in the realm of 80 some odd million. Man, I could be wrong. Let's not state that. I have no idea how many millions sold, but I know that there were a lot of NESs sold in retrospect, and the fact that they were able to do that during recessions is pretty cool.
One huge game, which a lot of you should know. I feel like I don't even say want to. I want to say should know. Duck Hunt came out on the NES.
Yes, I
Duck
remember
Hunt
playing
was
that.
huge. Yeah, it was a great console. Moving on. Then in 1989, Nintendo managed to top itself. The Game Boy set the baseline for portable gaming consoles, made Tetris a phenomenon, and probably drove more AA battery sales than any device known to man.
Oh my gosh.
On its own, it sold close to 120 million units during its lifetime.
Wow.
Chances are somebody you know still has one today, and that somebody is me. It is at home in the cupboard in its box. And that thing is huge and awesome.
Huge and awesome. Yes, very much so.
Yes. Just so you know, it is gray, has buttons, and has a screen. Look up the images; they're really cool.
Those are fat. My dad had one. He
Yeah.
loved it.
And just know, there's no backlit screen on this. This is before backlit screens. This is one of those consoles where if you were driving in the car, you had to be under a light.
Oh yeah, no backlit. That's exactly
Yeah.
right. Even for the Advance, the Game Boy Advance didn't have a backlit screen. The
Yeah.
original.
Proper follow-up to the NES was the Super Nintendo, which hit the U.S. in 1991. While it wasn't as big a smash as its predecessor, it was still a top seller of the 16-bit era, which brought a wave of more powerful machines and more complicated controllers. Had this one as well. Such a fun console. Like both this and the NES, just
Bear in
I
mind
can't even
too.
have the words. It's just so nostalgic.
Yeah, these are the ones that I think are most nostalgic for a lot of people. And you can get the SNES Mini or the Classic or whatever they're called, and I think that a lot of people love those. I remember when it came out, like people were selling them for insane amounts on eBay. I have a couple of them actually, and then the NES console also is available in a Mini. Very cool. I think a lot of people enjoyed that. Just to go over some numbers for you, by the way, because I did find them. Looking at the NES, that sold 61.91 million units in its lifetime. Most of the units were actually in America at 34 million, which sold almost twice as much as Japan, which was 19.35. Looking at the SNES, that sold 49.1 million, most of which again was in North America at 23.35, 17.17 in Japan. And I'm just going to go ahead and go over these now. Nintendo 64, almost 33 million units, 20 million plus in America, and then only 5.45 in Japan. I don't know why there was such a huge dip. It seems like that's a really big disparity.
Yeah.
Moving from there, we have the GameCube, which only sold 21.74 million, and that sold almost 13 in America and just over 4 million in Japan.
Yeah, that means that was really scarce in America. I knew someone who owned a GameCube. Maybe that was like one
I
of the
knew
rare
one guy that had a GameCube.
Not many people can say
I
that.
don't remember him
apparently.
anymore. It's been so long. He was so odd. No one liked him. That game, we called him GameCube boy.
Yep. He just had a pocket full of those mini discs.
Those mini day, yeah. He would always try to get you to play with him, but you'd say no,
Yep.
PlayStation 2 or quit.
It doesn't read in my PlayStation. Anyway, moving on. Oh yeah, just one thing to add on to that NES. It launched a murderer's row of hits from Super Mario World to Donkey Kong Country to Final Fantasy as well.
Final Fantasy 6 was
Yes,
their
Final
last
Fantasy,
Final
yeah.
Fantasy on the...
Yes. Thank you, Nick. Nintendo followed up with that with its first
The most
veritable
amazing console that they've ever brought
the
out.
first bomb console, not in a good way. The Virtual Boy. It sounds awesome. So the
So let's hear about it, Victor.
So yeah, it is the Virtual Boy. The clunky contraption. The clunky contraption hinted at virtual reality well before the Oculus Rift, but the experience was about as smooth as you'd expect VR 1995 to be. The games were limited, the tech induced nausea. The whole thing was discontinued less than a year after it launched.
Good God, that's the biggest mistake I feel like you could ever imagine. By the way, if you haven't seen a Virtual Boy, it's this kind of like weird. It looks exactly like you would expect from the 1990s. It's like a weird red style glasses set that you put over your head, and
like
there's a little controller.
Yeah, you set it on the table and you just kneel down, and it's got like a stand where you just kind of
Put your face into
put
it.
your face into it.
It's weird. I don't know what Nintendo was thinking. I don't know who cleared that idea, but they'd be fired if they worked for me.
I honestly really want to try one so bad. So if any of you
Just for
listeners
fun.
have a Virtual Boy, send it to us and let us play it. We'll do a review on
And
it.
we'll mail it back.
Mail it back for 1 day shipping for you. This offer still stands years in the future. So if you're watching this years from now, please know we still want to play the
Even
Virtual
if I'm
Boy.
dead, just lay it on my grave. Pick it up in a week.
Then, moving forward, the Nintendo 64 came a year later. Like the Super Nintendo, it boosted the hardware. 64 was for the 64-bit processor, allowed for more fantastic games. Ocarina of Time.
No,
GoldenEye
whoa. Ocarina of Time.
Okay. I'm sorry. I know
It's
someone's going to...
I'm sorry.
Okay, fine.
I had to correct you.
Okay.
Ocarina of Time.
Ocarina of Time. Sorry if I have offended you. I'm going to officially, at the end of this podcast, write an apology that's 5 minutes long. GoldenEye 007, Mario Kart 64, and etc. And which induced a more complex controller, which, if nothing else, has never been duplicated, surprisingly enough. Yeah.
Shockingly, no one ever duplicated that stupid, sorry design from Nintendo.
I mean, unlike that SNES, though, it has definitively more popular rival. So Sony's disc-based PlayStation arrived the year before and smashed Nintendo 64
Yes,
sales.
they
to the charts.
did.
But the 64, I love the 64.
A lot of people love the 64.
My favorite game, for sure, in the 64 was that Jedi Fighter Star Wars game.
You and everybody else probably. Honestly,
That's
a lot of people love that game.
Yeah. And then there was a game called The Suffering. Not many of you probably know about it, but it was kind of violent.
That was also the system that brought two of the most held Zelda games of all time.
Yes.
Ocarina of Time, which you
Yes.
butchered the hell out of.
Ocarina of Time.
Ocarina of
Octopus
Time.
of Time.
Octopus of Time. But Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, again, two of the biggest Zelda titles ever to hit.
But I mean, stopping at 64 for me. Nick, you want to continue on the timeline?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's go ahead and push forward here. While Nintendo had launched a couple iterations of the original Game Boy, by 1998, the Game Boy Color was the most significant of the bunch, and as you can guess, it was a Game Boy button color.
Whoa!
It was way small. I don't think that it mentions this at all, as I'm seeing. It was way smaller. It was a lot more portable. The handheld of it was nice. This screen, the color screen, vivid, almost like an OLED.
Yeah.
Not even close, but it was really cool. The colors weren't exactly vivid. Here he goes contradicting me. But the specs were better. The hardware was backwards compatible, and the whole thing was affordable. There were many children of the 90s with warm memories of playing Pokemon on one of these guys, myself included.
Yes.
I loved the stupid little trading cord that you needed to connect Game Boys together. If you think about it, that's actually really cool that they did that. It's really cool that they did that back in the 90s, that they had like that cord that you can connect the Game Boy to, and you could like trade Pokemon back and forth.
Yeah.
There was also a Game Boy printer, if you didn't know that.
Oh yeah, I did hear about that.
Yeah, interestingly enough. We need to do, honestly, as fun as this is, we need to do like a real retro. And talk about some badass stuff. But continuing on with this episode, we have the first real upgrade to the Game Boy series came with 2001's Game Boy Advance. Nintendo likened it to a Super Nintendo in your pocket, which wasn't totally accurate, but gets the point across. The other big change was how it stretched out the classic Game Boy design. Nintendo would continue to tinker with the 2003's Game Boy Advance SP and 2005's Game Boy Micro. First of all, Game Boy Micro, amazing. I still want to buy one. I regret so much. I was in Walmart. I think I was like 17 years old. They still were selling the Game Boy Micro for whatever reason at that Walmart. And it was $90 or $100, and I was like, that's just too much money, I'm not going to get it. If I can go back and slap that kid and tell him to pick that thing up, I would. I've never had a Game Boy Micro. I always wanted it. I've had a Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance SP, and I had the
SP is the square one, right?
The SP was the one that was like a little square and it flipped open,
Yeah.
and it was the first one with a backlight, a built-in backlight, and a built-in battery, so you could charge it up. That one was really, really cool. I feel like the Game Boy SP is the one that people probably most likely remember and still have today. And that was just a hell of a time. I love the Game Boy Advance. It's one of my favorite consoles from Nintendo, honestly.
I still have my Pokemon Ruby version Game Boy Advance cartridge.
Yeah.
I would spend hours. It would be the simplest game. You just walk around and try to avoid the bushes because you're trying to get somewhere, but you have to go through a bush to find someone, and you end up in a Pokemon battle you don't want to battle.
Boom. Boom, Pokemon battle. Yeah, it was a fun game console. I loved those Pokemon games specifically. Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald. Emerald was like the best Pokemon game. And then Fire Red and Leaf Green.
We're gonna find some. If any of you listeners know of any Game Boy Advances out there,
yeah, we know. I'll tell him right now, guys. eBay has Electronic Bay is one of the best websites for this kind of stuff, and you could find lots and lots of stuff. I'm actually gonna look there for a Game Boy Micro, honestly. Anyways,
you heard it here, folks.
you heard it here. I will find a Game Boy Micro. Mark my words. 12-year-old Game Boy Micro. All right, moving right along, with the Nintendo GameCube arrived late in 2001, take on Sony's PlayStation 2 and the Microsoft Xbox. It didn't really work out. PS2 was this certifiable juggernaut, and the GameCube's lacking third-party support wasn't going to stop it. Many GameCube owners still look back at the device fondly, but in many ways, it was a precursor to the struggles of Nintendo that they would have a decade later with the Wii U. Again, though, its colorful design and tiny game discs, funky controllers led to the machine's distinctive vibe. I remember that specifically, had one, loved it. I do think the GameCube was kind of an underrated console. I hate that they used those stupid little proprietary discs. I have no idea why they did that. If they put a DVD player in there and had a little bit of a different design, I wonder if it would have done any better.
Yeah.
Apparently, from what I hear all the time, it was actually a very powerful console. And it was the first time Nintendo released something that was really powerful in its generation.
I did like the loading screen for the GameCube though. It was kind of catchy with the little.
Oh yeah, the little cube that would roll around and make the G.
Yeah.
And kind of in the shape of a cube. Sorry, that was.
I let you struggle there. I was gonna help, but
I wanted to, but it was just so fun. I wanted to see where he was going with this. Notable games which are not listed, but I want to mention. Wind Waker, one of the most notable games. Twilight Princess actually came to that in addition to the Nintendo Wii, but I think the GameCube version was the way to play, if I remember correctly. Resident Evil 4 actually, if I'm not mistaken, came to GameCube first. And one of the most notable games of all time, but probably people remember it and go, that's a PS2 game. And thank you, Nintendo. And then the re-release, the bring back of Metroid with the Metroid Prime series, Prime 1 and 2. And I think that 3 was on the Wii. Moving right along. By the way, that system, as I mentioned earlier, only sold 21.74 million units. Very, very low numbers. Its next handheld, on the other hand, was anything but a flop. The dual-screen Nintendo DS sold a whopping 154 million units from 2004 to 2014, which makes it the highest-selling device in the company's history and a clear winner over Sony's PlayStation Portable. And I know now that we didn't talk about the PSP or the PS Vita in Sony's history, and all I want to mention is those were Sony's two portable consoles. They weren't super notable. The PSP was, which they made several iterations of it. They had like the original, which had the UMD discs, and then they went all the way down. They had slimmer units all the way down to the PlayStation Portal or the PSP Go, which was really cool. I always kind of wanted one, but you can't use UMDs on it. Everything had to be downloaded. I don't even know if you could still download stuff from the store.
Probably
for
not.
a PSP Go.
I do miss the UMDs though. They're some really cool ones, and I know movies were on UMDs as well.
Yeah. I think it's funny because I feel like the PSP wasn't successful, but I think it sold something like 90 million units, which is insane. That's absolutely a successful console. Yeah. And then they made the PS Vita, which was just a critical flop. I think sold close to 20 million units, but that's all the information you guys are going to get on that. Sorry, we're doing Nintendo right now.
Yeah. Nintendo.
It had a limited. Back to the article. It had a limited touchscreen years before the iPhone had brought quality games across lots of genres. Nintendogs, anyone? Nintendo launched a few variants in the following years, but together the DS family represents one of Nintendo's boldest hardware designs. I remember the original one was kind of big and fat, and I had that. Then I had a Nintendo DS Lite, which was way better. They also had the DSi, which I believe couldn't play Game Boy Advance games anymore. And then I think they had a DSi XL. So there was a larger Nintendo DS too.
All I remember is kids in my middle school were in classrooms at lunch. Hey, let's all play so-and-so together. And they were like, it infected middle schools everywhere and high schools everywhere.
And I think that was the first one that had wireless built in.
Yeah.
So you could it was wireless. Yeah. Well,
you mean
turn on your Wi-Fi and we'll connect. All right, moving right along, the good times kept on rolling with Nintendo's 2006 Nintendo Wii. You probably know the story by now. Instead of trying to catch up with Sony and Microsoft on a technical level, Nintendo and its motion controllers went after this so-called casual market. Very much so,
Boom.
By the way. There was tons sold. I don't think it even mentions, but I think it was something like 110 million sold. It was really, really just a big console that tons and tons of people have. And you probably use it as a doorstop now, because nobody has that anymore. Anyway, the Wii was released 2 years before Apple's App Store became a thing. It's easy to think of it as just being the right device at the right time. In many ways it was. At the same time, it's just plain fun playing Wii Sports with anyone in your house. To this day, Nintendo is the only company to achieve success with motion controllers on a home gaming console. Very true. The Kinect didn't really pan out, and PlayStation Move didn't pan out very well either. Simple controls convinced many people who never buy a console to jump on board and helped make the Wii one of the best-selling video game consoles of all time.
I was the best sit-down bowler. I swear I could just bowl.
Oh, my God.
I could bowl turkeys all day.
Turkeys all day, right from the couch.
Yep.
I had a Nintendo Wii. I didn't get it during like the console generation's life cycle. I bought it after the fact, or like near the very end of it, and it was specifically just so that my mom could play Animal Crossing, and she loved it. Animal Crossing, City Folk, and that console. It's funny. I don't really remember a lot of like titles of note on that console, truthfully. But moving right along, launched in 2011, the Nintendo 3DS and its various iterations is Nintendo's current handheld machine, kind of. It's the nifty ability to create a 3D effect without forcing you to wear any goofy glasses. And then they realized it was useless and people don't like it. 5 years later, that trick is more novelty than breakthrough, but it's still different, and it's easily outpaced Sony's Vita in terms of overall sales. I don't remember how many sales the Nintendo 3DS had. As far as I know, it's something like 60 million. It wasn't huge. It didn't beat out the Nintendo DS. It's a decent console. They have the DS, or I'm sorry, the 3DS, the 3DS XL, the 3DS, or I'm sorry, the new 3DS and the new 3DS XL, which have the little nubbin, so that you kind of have two controllers or two control sticks, and then they have the 2DS and the 2DS. The new 2DS or the 2DS XL? I don't remember. I'm sorry. I'm not as versed in that, but there's lots of 3DS consoles for you to choose from.
Yeah, I enjoyed the 3D feature. That little knob, you could control how much you see.
I always hate it. I never turned it on.
Yeah,
But,
it did kind of hurt my eyes
some
a
people
bit,
did like it.
It was interesting. It was interesting.
Yeah.
Something new, right?
Very much so. This, and also, actually, I want to mention, this is the console that brought us Pokemon X and Y, my favorite Pokemon games that are not the OG Pokemon games. Those games are great, phenomenal. I think that they're awesome. And then the best ones that have come out in the recent years. Like in the last 10 years, those are the best Pokemon games, as far as I'm concerned.
I want to see a Yu-Gi-Oh game.
Yu-Gi-Oh game? I need a Yu-Gi-Oh game. Nintendo, make it happen.
Make it happen.
Moving on to the worst Nintendo console as far as I'm concerned, right there next to the Virtual Boy. The struggles of Nintendo's next console, Wii U, are well known. It's notably weaker than the PS4 and Xbox One, has nowhere near the same level of third-party developer support, and its tablet controller, which let you play whatever you'd like around the house, is clunky. As a result, it sold less than 14 million units and its launch in 2012. This is another thoughtful, original concept with some great Nintendo games, but the execution has always felt half-baked, and the value just isn't there. This console is used widely as one of the most failed marketing attempts ever. Even people that I know that play video games, like consistently, gamers, I would say, I got a Wii U when it originally came out, and they're like, oh, the add-on for the Wii? And I was like, no, it's a fully new console. They're like, it is? I thought it was just a tablet for the Wii. Not only does it look kind of like a Wii, like a slightly streamlined Wii, but then they just call it the Wii U, and they just added a shitty Fisher-Price style tablet with it. Honestly, I could do a whole episode on how much I hate the Wii U. I don't like that console. I have it, and I hate it. There are some decent games on it. I despise that console.
I want to know how it works. Like, I don't know. I didn't really read much about it, but like,
it's so bad. One day we'll do a Let's Play, and it'll be exclusively Wii U. That might not even be true. Don't take that to heart. Take that with a grain of salt. I don't want to play the Wii U, but maybe I'll give Victor the wonderful experience someday. That controller is so bulky and awkward. It's a bulky, awkward-ass controller. It doesn't make any sense. I've said this to everybody that I know that I talk to gaming about. If I were at Nintendo and somebody brought that in and said, this is my idea, I go, oh, this is your idea? Yeah, this, and we want to call it the Wii U. I'd go, that's phenomenal. Pack your shit, you're fired. And everybody's like, that's horrible. Why would you do that? And I was like, the console sold 14 million units and almost destroyed Nintendo. Why wouldn't I? I'm a good businessman if I let that person go. Anyways, I don't like it, as you can tell. But this brings us to one of the consoles from Nintendo that I like the most recently. That brings us to the Nintendo Switch, a hybrid that you can play on the go and on your TV at home. It is a wildly different approach to what Sony and Microsoft are doing. In portable mode, Nintendo Switch functions like a way more powerful Game Boy with a touchscreen, but the controls can also be separated from the screen with a two-player experience on the go. When at home, a docked Switch functions as a modern TV console. It doesn't really explain that, but there's Joy-Cons on the side. Usually each person can use a Joy-Con if there's a two-player game. Yeah. With the Nintendo Switch, Nintendo has also managed to correct some of the online infrastructure issues that plagued prior Nintendo consoles. No, it has not. Don't believe this article. Nintendo's online is just, it's not up to date, just to put it in perspective. I don't even think that they've looked at the mistakes that Sony and Microsoft have made and corrected at this point. They have a perfect template for what to make an online infrastructure to be, and they don't use it. They don't look at the other companies. They just go, what can we throw together in 20 minutes? For all of our Nintendo Switch users. With the Switch, Nintendo's also managed to, okay, no, I read that, that's a lie. The eShop feels more functional than ever on Switch, and the wide variety of digital titles address the problems Nintendo Wii and Wii U face with third-party support. And even though it's been less than 2 years since launch, the Switch is already, it's been more than 2 years now, Switch has already had its fair share of amazing games, including The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, absolutely, and Super Mario Odyssey, which to me was pretty good, not amazing. If the Switch keeps up a healthy pace of growth and maintains developer support, it could eventually earn a place among Nintendo's most beloved consoles. I think it already is. Yeah. It's already one of the best-selling consoles that Nintendo has. I think it's on pace to beat the Nintendo Wii, which it will be huge for them. It's a huge win for them after having such a terrible console in the Wii U. I love it's the concept of the Wii U brought to reality, where it's just this game console where you could play it at home, or you just take your tablet version of it and then you just on the go, and you could play any game in tablet or TV form, as far as I know.
I'm so tempted to get one. I want a portable gaming system.
It is a must-have, but at this point, if I were you, I would wait. Maybe they'll make a Switch Pro. Maybe they'll make a Switch Mini,
or maybe the Microsoft and Sony cloud, or the different cloud platforms where you can play on your iPhone. You can play Xbox games on there, like we talked about in the previous podcast. Yeah,
might be worthwhile.
Yeah, but I mean, then again, it's also, is it worth the wait? If I want to play on the go, I better grab a Switch.
I know I need a Switch. Yeah. I like the Switch. I think it's great. I really feel like it is one of Nintendo's best consoles today, if not the best console. I love it a lot. I feel like they're bringing great games to it. They're making up so much for the mistake of the Nintendo Wii U.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't have a ton of nostalgia when I think of Nintendo. I think a lot of people really have a lot of nostalgia for Nintendo. For me, I've never been a huge Mario fan, which probably takes away from it a little bit. The biggest into Zelda I've ever been is now, because of the Breath of the Wild. I did play Ocarina of Time, but again, I've never really been huge into Zelda, mostly because I was a PlayStation, Sony pony.
Yeah, and I had Nintendo. A lot of people that came over, they always brought their gold cartridge, Zelda game over, but I never really gave it a shot, so I'm not really huge on it either, but I'm just excited to see what their next step's gonna be.
I really like the Nintendo Switch, and I've been having a great time with it. And I think that this is Nintendo's. It's probably the best console for me to date, and I'm just excited to see where it goes.
Versatile.
But exactly, and that's it. There you go. We did all three of the articles. We've had a good time so far. I think that these articles are great. Highly suggest checking them out. If you're listening to this on YouTube / watching it while you see the gameplay, then you should be able to find the links below. Otherwise, as we mentioned earlier, I'm just going to go over them briefly one more time. Victor, if you don't mind telling us where we can find this Xbox article.
So the Xbox article was on digitaltrends.com. Subject is, has it really been 17 years, the past, present, and future of Xbox, written by Rick Marshall, posted on April 18th, 2019.
Moving from there, we had from GameSpot.com, The Evolution of PlayStation Consoles by Jimmy Thang, November 3rd, 2016. And then History of Nintendo. It is a visual history of Nintendo's video game consoles, written by Jeff Dunn and Kevin Webb. That one is from BusinessInsider.com. Highly suggest checking these articles out. They're nice. You probably heard most of it from us, but there's some pictures that you can take a look at. There's a little bit of verbiage that we probably messed up on. We didn't exactly read them verbatim, but we tried.
And if there's any additional information, you want more detail about something we went over, don't be afraid of doing your own research too. There's a lot of stuff out there about these consoles and their technology and just information in general for these things.
Yeah, absolutely. Check them out. Have a good time. Enjoy retro. We'll try to do a more extensive retro podcast in the future. Just a retro episode, probably not anytime soon. Also, we do want to mention, we probably got a little bit premature. I think in the very last podcast, we said we want to do this once a week. But I think what we're going to do here, just so we give you a heads up, the one or two viewers, we want to move probably to once every other week with the podcast. And then every other week, the week that we're not rolling out the podcast, we're going to be doing a video more than likely drone videos for a little while. So if you're into drones, if you like that kind of stuff, you can enjoy Just Another Tech and Gaming Show drone coverage.
Yeah, be sure to check us out on YouTube. Subscribe so you can be notified every time we post a new video. Comment. We want to hear your feedback as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We would love to see how poorly we're doing and what you think we can do to improve. Or if you enjoy, which is good too.
Or if you just want to talk with us.
Or if you just want to say something.
We'd love to hear from you guys. Yeah.
Comment, what's up? We'll comment back. Nothing. Anyways, thank you again for joining us. It's been fun. We hope to see you guys again soon. And have an amazing week.
Yeah, we can't wait till next time. Yeah.
Can't wait till next time. See you guys later.
Finn.